大家好啊！香港時間11:07收聽收睇緊嘅係 Action World 世界頻道同埋 Facebook 直播。今日咧，我哋有 Mark Clifford CFHK 嘅總裁，亦都係咧前蘋果 Next Digital 嘅董事。Mark, it's a pleasure to have you appearing at Action World again. 30 days from now, yeah, 30 days from now, we will have the World Hong Kong Forum in Toronto, and Jimmy's trial is still going on. He is doing his testimony, so to speak.
Yeah, I think well, first of all, Ed, great to see you again, even if virtually. Look forward to seeing you in person in Toronto in a month. So, I think it's very important for us to keep Hong Kong in the spotlight, keep reminding people what's going on in Hong Kong, and of course, in particular, what perhaps the highest profile thing right now is Jimmy Lai's trial.
Right. And it seems like the drilling, I mean, it's 11th day. I'm just reading the online media about the content of his trial. I think the regime basically doesn't want to let him get out of jail. I mean, keep on asking things that are trying to, well, literally crucify him, the way I look at it.
Yeah, yes, figuratively and literally. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point. So it's 4 years that he's been in jail. I mean, it was 4 years ago at the beginning of December 3rd, I believe, that his bail was revoked and he went into jail. He was allowed out for a few days over the Christmas holiday. And then on December 31st, 2020, he was put in jail. So think about that, 4 years, more than 1,400 days. And he's been in solitary confinement most of that time. And as you say, the trial is just going on and on. This national security law trial took them 3 years to even start it. The trial was supposed to last 80 days. It's over 100 days. And he's testifying in his own defense, and he's mounting, I think, a very spirited defense. He's saying he didn't do anything wrong. What he did, I think, was what he always did, which was to try to uphold what he says are Western values, universal values, first among them rule of law, but of course free press, free speech, freedom of religious worship, freedom of assembly. I mean, all the freedoms that China promised Hong Kong that it would keep after the 1997 handover, but promises that it's broken. And I think you're right. The government, of course, wants to keep him in jail. They don't quite know what to do with him, I think. They haven't run across anybody like Jimmy Lai before. I don't think in the 75 years that the communists have been ruling China have they come across a case quite like this, which does take advantage of the relative openness in Hong Kong. We still have open court. That's very, very important. In the mainland, I mean, there are many, many brave dissidents and political prisoners. They usually don't have a trial in open court where the world can watch. So it's a small consolation, but we should at least take advantage of that and use the information we get to keep broadcasting to the world what Jimmy is saying and how he continues to fight for Hong Kong, for Hong Kong people, for Hong Kong freedom.
Yeah, and he also said he loves China, but he just doesn't like the totalitarian regime. So it's not like he hates 1.3 billion Chinese people. He doesn't. He loves China.
I think that's a really important point, and I was glad to hear him bring that out in court, because it's one thing that in the course of writing my biography, The Troublemaker, on Jimmy, which has just come out, I was really struck by talking to people who knew him back in the 1970s, 1980s, really what a patriot he was, and how much he loves China, and the really high hopes he had for economic reform, and his belief that economic reform would lead to political and social reform and opening and freedom. And so I think it's really important that all of us draw the distinction between the Chinese Communist Party and China and the Chinese people. Nobody's against the Chinese people or against China or the idea of a rising China. I think what Jimmy and many of us oppose is the totalitarian destruction of freedom, the destruction of freedom for 7.5 million Hong Kongers, and of course for 1.3, 1.4 billion Chinese. It's not what they deserve. It's not what they chose, and I don't think it's their fate forever.
Hmm. And I'm very impressed to see Jimmy doing his self-defense or testimony. Like the first part, at first I thought it's just his lawyers who will be saying everything, but now it's talking about his mission, his life.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I have no idea. I'm not in touch with his lawyers, nothing to do with them. But most lawyers will tell a client in cases, like this, don't testify or
Yeah.
just be very, very careful in your testimony. But I think that and of course, we don't have any tapes or any audio or anything, but just reading what Jimmy said, it's like the Jimmy we know and love. And it just sounds like Jimmy. I can hear his voice, him talking about freedom and how important it is, Hong Kong and all the freedoms that first came under British colonialism, but were promised to be not only maintained but extended during Chinese rule. Remember, the Chinese promised to introduce universal suffrage. They promised to let Hong Kongers be able to elect the chief executive and the legislative council members in full universal suffrage, meeting international standards. And that's all Jimmy wanted, really. I mean, the guy, and it's very clear in the testimony, never believed in Hong Kong independence and was very against violence on the part of the students. So what comes through to me is a very moderating force.
Yeah, and I always remember during our encounter, he talks about he is a strong defender of one country, two systems, the 1.0 model. Right? It's nothing really like Hong Kong independence and on all these crazy theories that people think of. But he wants the one country, two systems to last until 2047. That's why
I
we
think
have
he described independence as kind of crazy. I mean, he's a realist. I mean, he was not a wild-eyed guy, and I think, it's just a sad reflection on Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party that you'd want to lock up a guy as moderate as Jimmy. And let's not forget, we haven't talked about Benny Tai and
Yep.
the Hong Kong 45 and the more than 1,900 political prisoners that have gone through the Hong Kong system in the last 5 years. I mean, incredible number. And what kind of place locks up people, many of whom are its best and its brightest, most of whom are not only nonviolent, but committed philosophically to nonviolence? I just think it's outrageous. And in the case of Jimmy, who's the one that I know the best, here's a guy who was also one of the great entrepreneurs of his generation. You want to lock him up in what you say is a business city? So, I think it's a pathetic window into the way the CCP works, and it's the fear that drives it, and its desire to control every aspect of people. I mean, it's truly a totalitarian regime, and the situation in the mainland has not been completely extended to Hong Kong. As I said, we have things like open court, and people can have lawyers who will robustly argue for them, but it's bad, and Jimmy's trial allows us to see, in many ways, how bad it is.
Yeah, and today's topic, now the Cantonese part, I don't have to say it, people know. The English part, our efforts will not be in vain, meaning that as long as there is an injustice, I guess we'll still keep on telling the truth outside of Hong Kong.
Yeah, I think, as a Catholic, I think Jimmy feels that his suffering is worthwhile. All of his suffering is worth it, and it will be transformed, and will work for the better good of Hong Kong people, but really the better good of Jimmy and Jimmy's spiritual development. So, I mean, he's driven by a faith that I think has a power that Xi Jinping and the CCP leadership may not completely appreciate, or maybe they do. But increasingly, it's Xi Jinping versus Jimmy Lai going toe to toe. One guy has all the power of one of the mightiest states in the world, and the other guy has only his body, his soul, and his moral force. And it's remarkable to see. It's remarkable to see how Jimmy continues to live as a free man, spiritually and intellectually. Physically, only Xi Jinping can decide when he'll be free, but he's living as a free man.
Now, on January 5th, definitely we will bring a very strong message to the Torontonians who are acutely aware of what's going on in Hong Kong. If they don't understand the story, we let them know, right, on January 5th. And you are actually the keynote speaker for the event with a whole hour for you, not just talking about the new book, The Troublemaker, but we talk about Jimmy's story. Yeah.
Well, I'm really looking forward to it. And of course, it's not only me who's speaking, there are you and a lot of other great, powerful voices. And of course, it's not only Jimmy. Jimmy's a symbol, but it's the 1,900 political prisoners. And really, I would say it's the 7 million Hong Kong people who are living in increasingly living in captivity now.
Right. And well, in the next 30 days or so, since today is December 5th, exactly 1 month from now, there will be a lot of promotions online. Tell people who will be speaking at which slot and whatnot. So just follow the channel, and it's a great pleasure to have Mark Clifford to appear at Etchin World again. And please, if you have any inquiries, you could email me, right, at ckchin@gmail.com. I'll give you all the details. And thank you, Mark, again. And see you in a month.
Great. Thank you. Do you want me to stay on?
Stay on.
Or are we done with it?
Yeah, we're done. We're done now. Okay.
Okay. Thanks. Okay. Take care. Bye-bye. Look forward to seeing you in a month.
Okay.